Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to our first online discussion for literature. I am laughing on the inside because this is already my seventh take. So I'm getting used to this. But I also hope that you come into this subject with an open heart and an open mind, and also just with an enthusiasm nga kaya ni nato. Unya, malingaw ta. Because I assure you that this is truly a fun subject and an especially necessary one given that it's a pandemic. So, what usually comes to mind when you think of literature? Do you think about William Shakespeare, Geoffrey Chaucer, Jose Rizal? Do you think about libraries or bookstores? Or is it something that never really crossed your mind? Because what I want for you to see in this subject is that it's so much more than an academic subject. It's actually a way of life, and it's very much intricately woven into us being human and in our culture. If you think about it, storytelling is something that we cannot live without. And there are stories that we carry with us forever. They may be fictional, like the movies that you've seen, the books that you've read, the songs that you've heard. And if you also try to think about it, your favorite stories, you take them with you forever. They never leave you. So you're actually a shelf of all of your favorite stories. But at the same time, not just the fictional stories, but the stories that you're also experiencing. The stories that you value personally, like the stories you tell your family, or the stories that were given to you by your family and by your friends. So storytelling, it's actually a way of life, and storytelling is something that we carry with us all the time. It's who we are. It's also our legacy, because come to think of it, when our bodies are no longer in this world, it's the stories that we also leave behind. So literature, that's the oral and written works that depict our beliefs, aspirations, values, and struggles. So when we say oral literature, that's the story that's been passed through word of mouth. So the stories that are passed from one generation to another, unya gistorya ra siya. Take for example, if you remember our first encounter and experience of oral literature when we were children and we did not know how to read yet. I remember nasama dang ako ang tuhod sa una. Unya, kiingnan dayon ko nga halaka, mugawas dira ang pari nga potulog o. Or accidentally swallowing a seed and then someone says, hala, mutubo ra ba na, mahimo ra ba nagkahoy? And when you're a child and you hear that, you're absolutely terrified because you believe in it implicitly. Unya maghuna-huna ka nga hala mutubo ang kahoy, unya ako kay mahimo sa kong kahoy. Will my parents still love me? What will be my life when I become a tree? So, ang atong experience sa oral literature, so kad pagkabata, hangtod karon na agihapon. Even the stories that we tell our friends and our family, that's already oral literature. So, 'di ba? Sa ato ang kinabuhi, naa jud ang storytelling, dili jud na siya mawa. Written literature, of course, that's the literature we formally know, the stories that we read. When we say that literature, it depicts our beliefs is ang ato ang mga gagmay o dagko nga pagtuo, we all have that. Small beliefs could entail having snacks every day is necessary, or sky blue is your favorite color. That's a small belief. But a big belief could actually ask questions like, is God real? Is love enough? Does forever last? So those are very big existential beliefs. So why is it important to have beliefs? And every time we read a story, there are always these powerful big beliefs that propel a fictional character. Why is that important? Because when you have beliefs, when you have an opinion, that actually it guides you in life. It tells you how you want to live your life and how you want the world to be. When you have a belief, you have something to fight for. You have something that you stand up for. Matod pa ni Voltaire, ingon siya, I do not agree with what you are saying, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it. And that's also an important thing to learn, listening. Because all of us, we might have different opinions and beliefs, but it's important that we listen to each other, because then we understand each other better. And our worldview becomes bigger, and there is room for empathy and understanding. So you listen to each other. And then we have our aspiration. So that's our dreams, right? So it's very important to have dreams kay nga naman, because again, it paves a path. It gives us something to live for. And if you notice in literature, our fictional characters, they have wants and they have dreams. And every time they go on that journey to achieve their dreams, it cannot be helped that we also ask ourselves, what about me? What about my dreams? What are my dreams? And how do I attain those dreams? How do I pursue those dreams? So having dreams, it's something that should not be taken for granted. Having something to pursue in this lifetime, having something to wake up for. Values, that is our belief of right and wrong, our stand on morality. So when we're little, it's actually very simple, right or wrong. We listen to what our parents tell us. Lying is bad, stealing is bad, cheating is bad. But when we become bigger, it starts to get complicated. Because then we learn that a person is not completely good and completely bad. That we are actually both. That we are capable of both good and bad. And we are defined by the choices that we make every day. Nobody's perfect, but then we also have the choices that we make. Take for example, there's this story by Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, and it's a story of prisoner 24601. He steals a loaf of bread, and when you're a kid, stealing is bad, so he must be a bad person. But then you hear about the reason why he stole a loaf of bread, and it's because the family, his sister, the son of his sister, his nephew, got really sick, and they didn't have food, they were starving. So he stole a loaf of bread for his family. And if you think about it, and if you were put in that same position, you could actually say, yes, stealing is bad, but I would do the same thing because my family is more important than not stealing. So literature, it shows us that the world is not just black and white, that people are complex, and that no one is entirely good and bad. And lastly, we have struggles. Struggles, that is mga kalisod that we actually face, the challenges that we face. And when we face challenges and have struggles, it's not something that we aspire or want in this lifetime. But again, going back to Victor Hugo, he also said that there is something more terrible than the hell of suffering. And that's the hell of boredom. Because when you are bored, it means that nothing is happening to you. But when you are suffering, it means that you are growing, that you are learning, that you have become a fuller person. So it's actually very important to struggle. It's very important to suffer. If you've seen Inside Out, it shows us that sadness, it's actually just as important as happiness. Because you only know true happiness when you've also experienced sadness. You only appreciate light when you've also been in the dark. So when you suffer, that's actually an opportunity for growth. So kung gibuwagan ta, yes, I am suffering. Or we look at suffering as an opportunity for growth. And just to add, I also have this strong opinion when it comes to saying char. Because if you notice, it actually, for the most part, it deprives us from saying what we need to say and feeling what we need to feel. Take for example, you tell your friend, "Bay, sakit kaya gibuhat na ko, bay, ipakawawan dyan ko niya." And then your friend replies, "Char." The usual reaction is mapalaw ka. And you actually change the subject for fear that you would be teased and made fun of. But it's actually very important to have that deep conversation. It's very important to give yourself space to grieve and be angry and be lonely and all of those negative emotions, because those negative emotions, it's just as necessary as the positive ones, because that's again where you grow and you become a fuller person. So give yourself that opportunity, and ayaw ipalaw ang imong kaugalingon, ayaw ipalaw ang ubang tao. And I hope that we stop saying char because we're afraid to feel and we're afraid to be vulnerable. Allow vulnerability. Now we proceed to your 5 literary genres. So you have your novel, your short story, your play or drama, your essay, and your poem. So these 5 literary genres, they are divided into 2, and that's your prose and poetry. The prose and poetry, those are your forms. So prose, that is in the form of sentences and paragraphs, and poetry, that is in the form of lines and stanzas. And for your prose, that's also divided into fiction and non-fiction. Fiction is based on the writer's creative imagination, and non-fiction, that's based on reality. A novel is an extended narrative with many characters and a complicated plot. So when you say extended narrative, it's a very lengthy story. Daghan kaayong mga characters involved, and complicated plot means that for sure it's going to take you on an emotional roller coaster ride. A lot of my students actually say that they do not like reading novels, and primarily I think because physically it looks very daunting. Magtanaw pa lang kaniya, makaingon na din ka nga, taas ra kaayo, dili lang ko anak, taas ra kaayo. Some of my students also say that it's because it's expensive. Sometimes I tell them nga, adto lang sa book sale. Kay sa book sale, na may mga tag 10 pesos dito nga mga libro nga, yes, they're very cheap, but they could also be very beautiful. In fact, I bought a book there just for 10 pesos, but it turned out to be one of the best books I've read. But also, okay, how much is a plane ticket worth to Manila? Let's say it's 4,000. How much do you think is a plane ticket worth outside of Asia? Maybe 40,000 on sale or 80,000. Just imaginatively speaking, how much do you think it's worth to go up on the moon? 1 million? But for 349 pesos, you get to know what it's like to be a young boy living under the stairs with a very mean aunt and uncle and cousin, and out of nowhere get this letter from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and then find yourself going through platform 9 3/4, riding a train, and then see Hogwarts for yourself and have classes like divination or defense of dark arts, or watch Quidditch as a sport. You get to experience all of that for 349 pesos. Or you get to know what it's like to be a mermaid who falls in love with a prince and understands what love really is, what it's all about. So reading books, reading novels, it really takes you on a journey that you will never experience elsewhere, only in a book. I firmly believe that everyone loves to read. For those who say they don't, it's just because they haven't found their right book yet. So if moingon ka nga, dili ka ganan mo basa, it's only because your right book is still out there, waiting to love you, waiting to be read. The first book that changed it all for me was actually Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. It's a story about a girl named Susan Caraway and asks everyone to call her Star Girl. And she was different. She loved wearing very long skirts and walking the hallways with her ukulele. And if she found out that it was your birthday, she would sing to you a happy birthday in the cafeteria, even though you were strangers. So, with this difference, she was bullied a lot. A lot of people did not like her. But then I learned in that novel is that it's not about what other people think of you. It's really about what you think and feel about yourself. So I learned to love myself better because of that book. During that time, I was a nursing student, and I can honestly say that it's really difficult to be a nurse. And I truly admire and appreciate what they do. And I wish that I had that intelligence and that skill and capacity. But it wasn't truthful to who I was. And I felt stupid. I felt very limited and lacking. But when I read that novel, I felt very different, but also it is in being different that you make a difference. So I decided, why not pursue literature? And when I finally pursued literature, that's when I just felt very happy and satisfied and fulfilled. And every night when I go to sleep, I'm always excited to wake up the next day knowing that I'm going to do what I love. And it's been that way for me up until now. I'm still very grateful for where this love and passion has led me. And it's all thanks to Stargirl. And I hope that you also find a book that does that for you. A short story is a brief narrative that concentrates on one situation and usually involving only 2 to 3 characters. So when we say a brief narrative, it's just a very short happening. Unya, it just focuses on usa na ka panghitabo. And usually, but not always, it just involves up to 2 to 3 characters. Again, some of my students say that they do not like short stories because this time, mubo ra sa kayo. But actually, short stories are just as significant as the novel, even though it's shorter. And even though it doesn't tackle it or doesn't have a very complicated plot, usara ang iyang gi-focus. Because take for example, have you ever seen a painting? Let's say from afar. Let's say we are looking at Van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night. And when you're looking at it from afar, you actually appreciate the whole painting. You see that, okay, it's a village under a starry sky, and the starry sky is an interpretation of the way that Van Gogh sees it, and you appreciate it. But have you also ever seen a painting up close, like really up close? Like you can almost breathe in the paint. Suddenly, your perception of Van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night from afar compared to if it's very up close becomes different. Because now, when it's so up close, you actually get to see the strokes of the brush. You get to see the mixing of the colors. You get to see the yellow with the red and the blue with the violet and the white. You actually appreciate the process better because you see the details. And that's what the short story is. It's just talking about one detail, but you appreciate the bigger picture because of that detail. There's this beloved short story written by Oscar Wilde. It's called The Happy Prince. And it's a story about a happy prince who lived inside of a palace surrounded with great big walls. And he didn't know that outside of those walls, his people was already suffering. And he was so ignorant about it. That happy prince died. And because of the king's grief, they actually built a statue of him. And it was covered entirely of gold, and the eyes were made of rubies, and the sword was covered with diamonds. And somehow, the soul of that happy prince went into that statue. And for the first time, the prince could actually see all of the suffering, all of the pain and the heartbreak. And he felt so helpless because he couldn't do anything to help them. He couldn't reach out to them to help them. One day, there was a swallow that landed on his feet, and the swallow was about to go outside of the city because winter was coming. Game of Thrones reference. Winter is coming. But then the swallow saw that the happy prince was crying, and he asked why. Why are you so sad? And the prince told him why and how he was so helpless. And the swallow decided to help him. So he distributed the rubies and the gold and the diamonds around the city, and it changed a lot of lives, and people did become happier. But then the swallow, winter caught up with him, and he couldn't leave anymore, and he actually died at the feet of the prince. And the happy prince statue looked very ugly already without the gold and the diamonds and the rubies. And when the mayor saw this, he decided to tear down that statue and replace it with his own. So it's a very short story, and it's very tragic. But when we think about giving and when we think about life, we think of these as very abstract things. But if you're just given a statue and a swallow, and how their relationship was like and how they helped people, it gives you that lesson that yes, you may seem like you're the happiest person in the world, but if your life is solely made for you, and if it is without giving, then it is not a life that's worth living. So a fulfilled life, a happy life, is one where you learn to give and not just receive. Player drama, it's a literary work that is intended to be performed. The operative word there is performed. So performance is a necessary aspect for this literary genre. Take for example, let's say it's not just limited to theater. If you remember, or if kaabot pa mo, katong mga radio dramas, nga, what do you notice when that's being performed? Mayroon sila nga, nidagan ako nang giablihan ang putahan, gibundak na ako ang putahan. And they do that, why? Because it's all about the senses. So it's not just through reading, it's also because dili ta makakita sa radio drama, they had to use our hearing ability. So they would actually show us through what we listen to. So the action, gipakita nila through saying it. Or it's a different experience when you read a piece of lyric. Someday, someone's gonna love me the way I wanted you to need me. Someday, someone's gonna take your place. But then, when it's turned into a song, sa piano palang daan, makaingon ka nga, mag-uul na ko. And then Nina sings it. And it's just so heart-wrenching. Nga bisan pag malipayon ka sa imong love life, mag-uul ka. Because it's intended to be that way. The storytelling is to the senses. Seeing, hearing, sometimes pagani, di ba, kay smelling. So you're actually feeling it, you're actually seeing it, you're actually hearing it. And that's the beauty of a performance, because it's storytelling in another heightened level with the use of the senses. The amazing thing as well with theater, I hope you've already seen a theater play, is imagine it's just one stage, but you're able to put an entire world in that one stage. In Miss Saigon, you put a helicopter there. In Phantom of the Opera, there was that lake and boat. In Wicked, you're able to make people fly there. So it's amazing. And I hope that you also get to see and experience that for yourselves. There's usually this debate, an ongoing debate about the book is better than the movie. But actually, for me, we shouldn't really compare, because if you talk, because it's different kind of joy for each genre. When you read the book, it's like you're the director and you're seeing it all happen in your head, and in your head it's just so elaborate and you could see everything in your mind and it's happening exactly the way you want it. So it's that intimate experience between you and the story. But when you're talking also about a movie, it's actually sitting there and just allowing yourself to be affected by the story. And that's also beautiful. Again, we are always affected by the movies that we watch, and our favorite movies, we are able to take them everywhere. We're able to carry them in our hearts. So that's also how it affects us. It's not just a form of entertainment, it's also a way for stories to truly dig deep into our souls and into our minds. An essay is a short literary work on a given subject. It's often analytic, speculative, or interpretative. So it's an opinion piece on a certain topic. And when you say it's analytic, it means that you analyze it, you critique it, you wrap your head around it, you form an opinion. When you say speculative, speculate, it's to ask questions. Now, if you read something, you just don't immediately believe in it. You also have to question it. Do I believe this? Or what is my opinion on this? What is his reference? Or you learn to ask questions. And when you say interpretative, it's how does this personally mean to me? How does this affect me? What do I feel about this? What is my interpretation? How do I take this? So it's your personal take on the essay. I think a lot of us don't like the essay at first because our opinion, our experience of it is very academic. Let's say grade school pa ta, high school na ta, college na ta, mutan-aw naman lang gani ta og salida, pahimuon pa jud ta og essay. So we always feel that essay is formal writing or it's very academic. But actually, it's not just for academic purposes. An essay could be very personal and informal. I hope that a lot of you here still write journals or keep diaries. There's this saying, it's not actually a person who keeps a journal, it's the journal who keeps the person. Because memories are fleeting, and each and every day we forget a little bit of the past. And if you want to preserve happiness, nawala. If you want to preserve happiness or learn also from the struggles and the sufferings you've had, it's important to keep a journal because you're able to really see your progress and also to get to know yourself, to really get to know yourself. Nga makaingon ka nga, ano na-crush mo ko ato niya sa una, uy. Or maditahan ako ani, uy. So you're able to see yourself in a third-person perspective. Also, it's actually essays that have really changed the mindset of this world for good. Take, for example, it has the power to change the world. Malala Yousafzai, she wrote essays for BBC and she talked about the discrimination against women in her country and how girls were not allowed to go to school and the things that they faced. And when she was 15 years old, she was shot by the Taliban for writing essays and giving interviews. She was shot 3 times in her head. And, you know, she's alive now. And she's really changing the world as well. And Malala said na they thought that they could stop her by shooting her, but no, she's only gotten stronger. And if you think about it, these grown men with their guns are afraid of a little girl with her pen and paper. It's because essays can truly change the mindset of people. And once it's able to change their minds, once the women know that they are powerful and that they are intelligent, then they will not tolerate discrimination. They will not tolerate abuse. And that's what they're afraid of. Why they're afraid of those essays that Malala wrote. So essays are powerful and essays are personal. And I hope that you don't forget that when you write your essays. Not just for academic purposes, but also for yourself. A poem it's writing in a language that's chosen and arranged to create a specific emotional effect. We all have the same words, but somehow poets take those same words and they make it mean more. They make it hurt more. They affect us with those words in a way that we never thought possible. Take for example, the first time you hear an "I love you," it's like it's the best thing you've ever heard in the entire world. But then "I love you" is said over and over again for, let's say, for a year, and somehow it's not the same feeling. It does not feel the way it did the first time you heard it. But when you're a poet, you're able to say "I love you" over and over again, but still make it feel like it's the first time. Because it's not about just telling, it's about showing. Let's say, for example, ingnon kag, bati kag naong. And kung naimay mo na to bati kag naong, masakitan ta, kaya bati kag naong. But if it's poetry, instead of saying bati kag naong, you say, ang imuhang naong, murag cake nga nabasa sa uwan ug nagpasag sa dan. And then somehow, it's still bati kag naong, but with the use of those images, you're able to truly feel nga, grabe, hagod din ako kabati og naong, nga, asa man akong ilong, asa akong mata, nga ako ang naong, murag cake nga nabasa sa uwan ug nagpasag sa dan. So, it's using those images and making the same meaning feel more, affect you more. There's this poem by Bobby Calderon. I don't know if it's exactly how I say it, but it's called "Kung Mapun-an Man ang Mga Letra," and it goes something like this. Gahapon, gipangutana ko nimo kung tambok na kaayo ka. Kung muingon ko sa tinuod, masuko ka. Kung mamakak ko, mulimod ka. Saksi ko sa imong pag-agi sa XXL, XXL, ug kung mapun-an pa man gani ang mga letra, ani ara gihapon ko sa imong kiliran, ug kana di na kinahanglan ipangutana pa. It's in the poem, there's no "I love you" in the poem, but you feel it and you know that it's a love poem. So "I love you" is the words "I love you." It's not present in the poem, but it is an "I love you." So that's what poetry is. It's using the least words possible, but also making it feel the most as well. And we will discuss further on, we'll further discuss the literary genres in our next discussions. And I hope that you understood them. I hope that I did a fairly good job with our first online class. I actually took the video for, 7 times already. So I hope that you understood our lesson. And next meeting, we're going to talk about the elements of fiction. And after that, we proceed with our short stories. So that is it for today. Amping mo pirmi. God bless.